U.S. President Donald Trump says he will now impose a 50% tariff on copper imports. He made the declaration at a cabinet meeting in Washington, but it's unclear exactly when the new tariff will take effect.
Other things, big ones. We did steel, as you know, they're 50%. We did aluminum, 50%. Lumber just came out. Why don't you announce copper? And we did cars. And now today we're doing copper.
In less than 24 hours after Donald Trump signed the order imposing a 50% tariff on imported copper, the United States officially lost a staggering $4.2 billion. Copper prices on the COMEX exchange surged 13% overnight, hitting a record high of $5.95 per pound. And that was just the beginning. Canada, the supplier of over 40% of refined copper to the U.S., immediately struck back. All export contracts were frozen, and mining giants like Teck Resources and Hudbay Minerals simultaneously halted shipments to the American market. Ottawa made a firm declaration: we can no longer rely on a trade partner that is unstable and unilaterally changes the rules of the game. The market atmosphere flipped instantly. U.S. electronics, construction, and automotive corporations plunged into a supply crisis unseen since wartime. Copper, the silent metal behind every circuit board, every wire, every motor, has now become the center of a new trade war. And this time, Americans are paying the price through every car, every light bulb, and every home they live in. The biggest question now is, what will America do when tariff policies are pushing its entire manufacturing base to the brink? Right after Donald Trump activated Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, declaring copper a strategic metal affecting national security, the 50% tariff on all imported copper was officially scheduled to take effect on August 1st, 2025. This wasn't a minor adjustment. It was a heavy blow to one of the most critical links in the U.S. industrial chain. The results were immediate. Copper prices in the U.S. market, specifically CME futures contracts, surged 13% in a single day, hitting record levels of around $5.64 to $5.69 per pound. Meanwhile, prices on the London Metal Exchange, LME, not only failed to rise but actually dipped slightly due to fears of declining U.S. demand, creating a price gap never seen before, with U.S. copper costing up to 25% more than LME. Precisely because of this disparity, a new arbitrage market emerged, exposing what many see as a fundamental failure in the Trump administration's protectionist logic. Just days after the tariff was announced, Canada reacted swiftly and forcefully. Ottawa declared its intent to diversify trade, severing its dependence on the U.S., and actively sought replacement partners in Asia and Europe. Considering that over 52% of Canada's copper exports went to the U.S. in 2023, this counterattack wasn't just symbolic, it was a calculated strategy. Mining giants like Glencore in Quebec were now being forced to reconsider and reroute their markets. According to financial experts, if this price gap persists, the U.S. faces a real risk of economic isolation, similar to the Hoover era of the 1930s, when destructive protectionist policies triggered a global trade freeze. Concrete warnings have surfaced. The surge in domestic copper prices could raise costs across the automotive, energy, and telecommunications sectors, potentially dragging the U.S. into a spiral of inflation and production stagnation, as there simply isn't a fast enough supply alternative. Even more concerning, the U.S. currently produces just over 50% of its refined copper needs, and imported about 810,000 tons in 2024, mainly from Canada, Chile, Peru, and Mexico. Meanwhile, domestic refining capacity is extremely limited. Facilities like ASARCO in Arizona have even had to shut down, incapable of replacing import volumes. So, the tariff doesn't solve the supply problem. It only creates higher prices, reduced availability, and prolonged supply chain risks. In the end, this 50% copper tariff landed like a stone thrown into the global marketplace. U.S. prices skyrocketed, LME dropped, and an unprecedented price gap opened up. Canada countered decisively, pivoting to new markets. Analysts warned of growing economic isolation and looming supply chain chaos. What started as a story about an industrial metal is now creeping into every car, every power line, every tech product, making it impossible for anyone to ignore the full-scale tension of this tariff policy.